The box wasn't mine. The name on the label wasn't mine either. But when I knocked on the door of apartment 4B to return it, the man who answered looked at me like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I had no idea that one wrong delivery would change everything. If you've ever found love in the most unexpected place, subscribe and hit that bell right now. I've always believed that ordinary Tuesday afternoons don't carry much weight. They're the plain middle of the week. Nobody expects anything remarkable to happen on a Tuesday. You get your coffee, you sort your mail, you keep your head down and move through the hours. That particular Tuesday in late October felt exactly that way when I came home from work, stepped into the elevator of my building, and punched the button for the 4th floor. My name is Wyatt Callahan, and I was 34 years old, tired from a long day of field surveys, and thinking about nothing more exciting than leftover soup and a quiet evening with whatever I'd saved on my streaming queue. The building I lived in was a converted 6-story and exposition park, Los Angeles, California. Not the flashy part of the city, not the hills or the beach, just a solid, older building with good bones, tall ceilings, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. I'd lived in apartment 4A for almost 3 years. I liked it for the light in the morning, and the fact that the courtyard below had a lemon tree that somehow survived everything the city threw at it. When the elevator opened, I saw the package before I even stepped off. It was sitting right there in the hallway, wedged against my door like it had been waiting for me specifically. A brown shipping box, medium-sized, with a bright orange label from an online retailer I recognized. My first instinct was that a friend had sent me something. My birthday had passed 2 months earlier, but you know how it is. People forget and then overcorrect. I picked it up and looked at the label. The name read Knox Mercer, apartment 4B. I stood there for a moment, shifting the box in my hands. My neighbor in 4B, I'd seen him maybe 4 or 5 times in 3 years, which is a very Los Angeles kind of statistic. I knew his first name only because I'd accidentally taken his mail once before, a magazine, nearly 2 years ago. I slipped it under his door and thought nothing of it. We'd never spoken. We operated in perfect parallel, the way urban apartment neighbors often do. Ships passing, you know how it goes. I should have just slid the package against his door and gone inside. That would have been the sensible thing. But the box was fairly large, and I was aware that porch theft was real even inside a locked building, and something about just leaving it felt wrong. So I knocked, and that is where ordinary Tuesday stopped being ordinary. The door opened, and I felt something shift in me. Immediately, the way your equilibrium tips when you're not expecting a step down in the dark. Knox Mercer was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark brown hair that had that unintentional, slightly too long look. He was wearing a faded green Henley and jeans that had dried paint on the knee, though I didn't know yet that the paint was part of his work. He had a dish towel over one shoulder, and the smell of something savory and good drifted out from behind him. He looked at the box, then up at me and said, "That's mine, isn't it?" It wasn't quite a question, more like a man confirming something he already suspected. "Delivered to my door by mistake," I said. "I'm Wyatt 4A Knox," he said, which I already knew. He reached for the box and then paused. "Thank you, sorry if this has been happening. The delivery algorithm on their site has my address stored wrong. I fixed it twice." I laughed a little. "Third time's the charm, maybe," he smiled at that. And I want to be careful here, because I don't want to oversell a smile. But it was the kind of smile that took its time arriving on his face, like it had considered whether the moment was actually worth it and decided yes. Slow and honest. I noticed it. "I was just finishing dinner," he said. "Well, attempting to finish dinner, you want to come in." It seems wrong to just take the box and shut the door on the guy who saved it from the hallway. I should have said no. I had my soup. I had my shows. I had the comfortable inertia of a solo Tuesday evening already planned out. But I said, sure, for a minute. That minute lasted 2.5 hours. We ate lamb chops and roasted carrots at a small wooden table near his kitchen window, and we talked. We the building, about the neighborhood, about the lemon tree in the courtyard that I mentioned, and that he said he'd never noticed even once. He laughed at himself for that. I told him I was an environmental field technician, that my work took me to soil and water sites across the Los Angeles basin, and sometimes further out toward the desert. He told me he was a prosthetic design specialist, that he worked with a small team at a clinic in Culver City creating and fitting custom prosthetic limbs, mostly for pediatric patients. He said it in the way people say things they genuinely love, but don't want to make a big deal out of. I thought that was one of the most quietly remarkable things I'd ever heard a person say about their own life. We talked about where we were from. He was originally from Flagstaff, Arizona. I'd grown up in Medford, Oregon. We'd both ended up in Los Angeles the way a lot of people end up there. Gradually, and then all at once, following something or running from something or both simultaneously. We talked about what we missed and what we didn't. He missed the quiet of the high desert. I missed actually being able to see stars at night. At some point he made tea, and we moved from the kitchen table to his living room, which was small and comfortable, and had bookshelves that were organized in no system I could identify. There were framed photographs on one wall, and I looked at them while he was in the kitchen. Landscapes mostly, mountain country, a few portraits of kids, 8 or 9 years old, grinning with unmistakable pride at something, and I wondered if those were patients he'd worked with. There was also one photograph of Knox standing with another man, arms around each other's shoulders, both of them squinting into what looked like high-altitude sunlight. I noticed it and I noted it, and I didn't ask about it then. But something in me registered the image and quietly filed it away with a question attached to it. When he came back with the tea, I told him I should probably get going. He said, of course, and we both stood at his door for a moment in the way you do when a conversation has been good, and neither person is quite ready for it to be over, but neither person is quite ready to admit that. Either. Thanks again for the delivery rescue, he said. Thanks for dinner, I said. That was genuinely the best Tuesday I've had in a long time. He looked at me with that same slow smile. Yeah, he said, me too. I went back to 4A and sat on my couch and didn't turn the television on. I just sat there thinking about the photograph on his wall, and the way he'd said the word yeah, like he meant more than one thing by it. And I thought about the fact that in 3 years of living 20 feet apart, we'd never once really seen each other, and I wondered what that meant. And I wondered whether I was reading into things that weren't there. But here's the part I didn't mention yet. I wasn't free, not entirely, not the way I should have been. I had been with a man named Gregory Alding for about 8 months. Gregory was a good person. Smart, dependable, someone who remembered what you told him about your day and asked follow-up questions. We'd met through mutual friends at a backyard gathering in Silver Lake, and things had moved along the way comfortable things do, steadily and without much drama. But in the last 2 months, something had quietly shifted. Not dramatically, nothing happened. It was more like a tide going out so slowly you don't notice until you look up, and the shoreline looks different than you remembered. I had not said any of this to Gregory. I hadn't let myself fully acknowledge it yet, sitting with it the way you sit with something uncomfortable because naming it makes it real. But sitting alone on my couch that night with the lamp on and the city outside doing its Los Angeles thing, I acknowledged it. Not because of Knox. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't a man in a relationship who saw someone attractive and threw everything away. It wasn't like that. It was that the evening in 4B had held up a kind of mirror, and what I saw reflected back was the plain truth that I had been moving through my relationship with Gregory on autopilot. And that wasn't fair to him. Not at all. I didn't do anything about it that night. But the question was there now, fully formed, and I couldn't put it back. The next morning, I went to work. I drove out to a monitoring site near Lancaster, spent 6 hours collecting water samples from a series of wells, ate a gas station sandwich for lunch, and drove home in the thick of evening traffic on the 14. And the whole time in the back of everything, there was that question. When I got home Thursday evening, I found another package outside my door. Same orange label, Knox Mercer 4B. The shipping address still hadn't been corrected. I stood in the hallway holding it for a long moment, and then I knocked on 4B again. He answered faster this time, like he might have heard me in the hall. He saw the box in my arms and exhaled a short laugh that was somewhere between embarrassed and delighted. They did it again, he said. 3 times the charm did not pan out, I said. He took the box and then looked at me, and there was a pause between us that had a particular quality, not awkward. More like 2 people trying to decide something without saying out loud that they're deciding it. I'm not going to pretend I was doing anything more interesting than reading on the couch, he said. You want to come in? I did. And this time I didn't pretend even briefly that I might say no. We spent the evening differently than the first. There was less getting to know you newness, and more of the easier rhythm that follows it. The rhythm that sets in when you've already established that you like someone, and now you're just exploring what that means. We played a board game he dug out from a closet shelf, one of those trivia games where half the cards are from the 90s and hilariously outdated. He was competitive in a way that was funny rather than annoying, arguing the edge cases with theatrical conviction. At one point, I was laughing so hard at something, he said that I knocked my tea off the arm of the couch. We both scrambled for it and ended up kneeling on the floor cleaning it up, and we were close to each other, and I was aware of that closeness in a way that I didn't try to talk myself out of. At some point during that evening, I asked about the photograph, the one with the other man in the mountain sunlight. Knox was quiet for a moment, not evasive, thoughtful. "That's my ex," he said. "Marcus, well, his name was Marcus." He paused. "We were together for 4 years. That photo was from a trip we took to Colorado about a year before things ended. It ended about 18 months ago now." He looked at the photograph from across the room, and his expression was neither bitter nor sad. More like the way you look at a chapter of your life that was real and true and also finished. "I still have it up because it was a beautiful trip," he said. "Not because I'm stuck anywhere," I nodded. That felt important to understand, and I was glad he'd said it clearly. "Are you seeing anyone?" he asked me, and there it was. The question I had known was coming, the question that had been following me around since Tuesday. I told him the truth. I told him about Gregory. I told him that we had been together 8 months, and that he was a good man. I told him that over the past couple of months, something had shifted for me, and that I hadn't handled that well yet, hadn't been honest with either Gregory or myself, and that I knew I needed to do something about it. I told him that nothing about this evening was responsible for that realization, that it had been building quietly for a while, and I'd been avoiding it. Knox listened to all of this without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "I appreciate you being straight with me about it." "You deserve to know," I said. He nodded. "I like talking with you, Wyatt. I liked it the first time and I like it now, and I'm not going anywhere." He paused. "But I also don't want to be part of a situation that isn't clean, for your sake or for his." That was exactly the right thing to say, and it made me respect him more than I already did. I went home that night with his words sitting cleanly in my chest. I didn't sleep much, not from guilt exactly, more from the clarity of knowing what I had to do and understanding that doing it would matter. The next morning, I called Gregory and asked if we could meet. We met for coffee at a place we both liked in Eagle Rock, a corner spot with good light and mismatched chairs. I told him the truth. I told him that I had been feeling a growing distance between us that I hadn't been naming honestly, that I thought I had been coasting on comfort and calling it contentment, and that he deserved better than that from me. I told him I was sorry for not speaking up sooner. I told him that none of this was about him being anything other than who he was, which was a genuinely kind and good person. He was quiet for a long time. He stirred his coffee. He looked out the window at the street, then he looked back at me. "I think I've been feeling it too," he said. "I just didn't want to be the one to say it first." We sat with that for a while. There was sadness in it, the real kind, the kind that comes from the end of something that was meaningful even if it wasn't permanent. We hugged in the parking lot afterward, and I meant the hug. There were no hard feelings left raw between us, and I'm grateful for that to this day. I drove home with the windows down even though it was cool. The air was sharp and dry the way Los Angeles air gets in late October when the Santa Ana winds come through. Everything felt very clear, a little tender but clear. I didn't go knock on Knox's door that day. That felt important. I didn't want the timing to look like one thing had immediately replaced another. It hadn't. I sat with my own company that evening and the next 2 days after, and I let things settle. But something was happening in those quiet days that I didn't expect. I kept thinking about Knox at work, not in a distracted way, but in a present way. The way you keep thinking about a piece of music you heard that got under your skin. I thought about the way he described his work with such matter-of-fact affection. Like fitting a kid with a new limb was something he'd been trusted with and took seriously. I thought about how he'd cleaned up the tea spill alongside me without making it awkward. I thought about the way he'd said I'm not going anywhere, and I realized I believed him. On Sunday afternoon, he texted me. We'd exchanged numbers on Thursday evening. The text said, "Went by the lemon tree this morning, finally looked at it. You were right." It's inexplicably surviving down there. I laughed out loud alone in my apartment. I texted back, "Told you." He replied, "Do you want to take a walk? It's nice outside," so we walked. Exposition Park was golden in the late October light, the kind of afternoon that makes Los Angeles actually look like the place everyone imagines when they picture it from somewhere else. We walked through the park and down into the surrounding blocks, and then along Vermont Avenue and didn't run out of things to say. We talked about his work more, and I asked questions I was genuinely curious about. He told me about a girl named Amara who was 7 years old and who had shown up at the clinic 8 months ago with a determination that had made the entire team fall a little bit in love with her. He talked about the materials and the engineering involved, and his eyes had that look people get when they're describing something they'd do even if no one paid them. I told him about a wetland restoration site I'd been surveying out near the base of the San Gabriel Mountains, a small seasonal marsh that shouldn't technically exist given how everything around it had been developed. But there it was, full of birds and frogs and impossible life. He asked good questions. He wasn't just being polite, he was actually interested. We ended up at a taco stand on Figueroa Street and ate standing at a narrow counter facing the sidewalk, watching the neighborhood move around us. It was relaxed. It was easy. It was the kind of company that doesn't ask you to perform or explain yourself. Walking back toward the building in the early evening, he told me he knew what I'd done, that I'd ended things with Gregory. Not because he'd asked. He said a mutual acquaintance had mentioned it without knowing there was any connection. I didn't bring it up to make it weird, he said. I just didn't want to be pretending I didn't know. I appreciate that, I said. We walked half a block in comfortable quiet. How are you doing with it? He asked. Honestly, I said. Better than I expected, sadder in some ways, clearer in others, he nodded. Endings that are honest are easier to carry than the ones that drag on. Yeah, I said. That's exactly it. We reached our building and he held the front door open. We rode the elevator to the 4th floor. When the doors opened, we stood in the hallway between 4A and 4B, and there was that quiet again. The kind that had developed its own vocabulary between us over these few weeks. I'm glad the delivery got messed up, he said. 3 times, he agreed. Neither of us kissed each other. Neither of us had reached that moment, not quite yet. But something passed between us in that hallway that was worth more than a rushed moment. It was the understanding that we were going to take this seriously. I went inside. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time just feeling the shape of things. And I thought, there is something real here. I don't know yet exactly what it is or where it goes. But I am paying attention to it this time. I am not going to coast. Then 3 days later, something happened that I hadn't expected. Something that knocked the whole thing sideways. It was a Wednesday, and I was back in the field, out at a monitoring site near the Domings Channel. I got a call mid-morning from my supervisor, a practical woman named Rita Chavez, who rarely called unless something mattered. She told me there was a project reassignment in the pipeline, a 6-week field engagement up near the Salton Sea, starting in 2 weeks. It was significant work, a long-term water quality study that my supervisor said had my name on it in terms of expertise. But it meant 6 weeks of field camp living, minimal cell service, and being effectively away from Los Angeles. I said I'd think about it and call her back. I sat in my truck at the side of a dirt access road and looked at the flat industrial water ahead of me and thought about the timing. 6 weeks, 2 weeks from now. Knox and I had been in this early, careful, genuine thing for not very long at all. We hadn't even defined it to each other. We'd been honest, we'd been present, we'd been patient. And now I was considering dropping a 6-week disappearance into the middle of it. Part of me wanted to turn the project down. The other part of me recognized that turning down work for the sake of something still this new was exactly the kind of decision I'd regret in the wrong direction. That evening I knocked on 4B and told Knox about it. He listened the way I'd come to understand was characteristic of him, fully, without jumping to a response before I'd finished. Then he said, "You should take it." Just like that, I said. "Wyatt," he said in a tone that was patient and a little bit amused. "It's a significant opportunity in your field. You told me 3 weeks ago how much the Salton Sea work matters as a study region. You'd resent not taking it." "I might also resent the timing," I said. He looked at me steadily. "If what's happening between us is real," he said, 6 weeks is not going to break it. And if it's too fragile to survive 6 weeks, then maybe we needed to find that out anyway." I exhaled. That's a very rational thing to say about something that doesn't feel entirely rational. "I know," he said, and he smiled slowly. "But it's still true." I called Rita back the next morning and accepted the project. The 2 weeks before I left were some of the best I can remember from that entire year. Knox and I spent time together without the pressure of defining things, which somehow made it easier to actually define things. We cooked together in one apartment or the other. We drove out to the San Gabriel Mountains on a Saturday and hiked along a trail that wound through dry chaparral and opened up into views that made both of us stop talking for a minute. He pointed out a red-tailed hawk riding a thermal far above the ridge. I found a native sage I wanted to show my field team. We fit together in the outdoors, the same way we fit together in conversation. One evening near the end of that 2 weeks, sitting on his floor with our backs against the couch, eating takeout from a Thai place on Jefferson, he said something I've thought about many times since. I spent about a year after Marcus, and I ended wondering if I was the kind of person who just wasn't built for staying, he said. Like maybe my ceiling was a certain kind of closeness and I'd hit it every time. You know that feeling? I did know it. I'd had a version of it myself, different shape but same hollow interior. And then what? I asked. Then I decided that question was probably the wrong one, he said. Instead of asking whether I was built for staying, I started asking whether I was being honest, whether I was actually showing up or just going through the motions. He was quiet for a moment. I think being honest is the structure that staying is built on. Not the other way around. I looked at him. The lamp in his living room put a warm light across his face and those bookshelves in their orderless order. That might be the smartest thing you've said to me so far, I said. Don't tell anyone, he said. I have a reputation for trivia arguments to protect. I left for the Salton Sea on a cold November morning. Knox walked me to my truck, which was loaded with field equipment and a cooler and 3 weeks of personal gear. He stood in the early light of the Exposition Park Street and said, "Come back." "Obviously," I said. "Text when you have signal," he said. "I will," I said. He reached out and briefly squeezed my arm just above the elbow with one hand. It was a simple thing, deliberate and warm and not small at all. The 6 weeks were hard in the way field work is hard. Physically demanding, logistically complicated, and isolating in a way that can grind on you if you're not careful. The Salton Sea region was stark and strange and genuinely fascinating. I collected hundreds of samples. I wrote more field notes than I had in any equivalent period of my career. The work was absorbing enough that the days moved. But the evenings, when I had enough signal to send a message, I talked to Knox. Sometimes it was just a few lines. Sometimes we managed a short call that cut in and out across the desert air. He told me about Amara's fitting going well, about a small problem with a component design they'd solved after 2 days of team problem solving. He told me about a book he was reading, one from his disordered bookshelves, a nature essay collection he thought I'd like. He mailed it to me at the field camp address, and it arrived 11 days later, slightly bent in one corner. I read it by flashlight in my tent 2 nights running. He texted, "Did it arrive?" I replied, reading it now, "It's good, thank you." He sent back a single emoji, a small yellow star. I looked at that star for longer than I should admit. I came home on a Thursday in mid-December, driving back into Los Angeles in the early afternoon, as the city sprawled out ahead of me under a hazy winter sky. I was tired in the deep muscle way that 6 weeks of field work produces, and I was also, I noticed, genuinely happy to be coming back. I parked in the building garage and took the elevator to the 4th floor, my duffel over one shoulder. And there, in the hallway outside my door, was a package. I almost walked past it. And then I stopped. The label said, Wyatt Callahan, 4B. I stood there holding my duffel and staring at the shipping label. My name, his apartment number, I picked it up. I turned it over. In the section where you can add a gift message, there was a handwritten note in small, careful script. It said, "I may have updated the shipping address wrong on purpose this time. No pressure. But welcome home." I laughed in the empty hallway, not a polite laugh, a real one, the kind that echoes. I knocked on 4B. He answered, and the look on his face when he saw me standing there was worth every mile of desert highway I'd driven to get back to this floor of this building in this ordinary neighborhood, with its inexplicably surviving lemon tree. "Was this intentional?" I said, holding up the package. "Completely accidental," he said, perfectly straight-faced. "Knox, 90% accidental," he said. "What's in it?" "A book I thought you'd like," he said. "Different one from the last one." I looked down at the box, then back up at him. "Can I come in?" I said. "I was hoping you'd ask," he said. I stepped through the door of 4B for the third time, but everything about it was different now. The apartment was the same. The bookshelves, the photographs, the small kitchen that smelled like something good on the stove. But I was different. We were different. The 6 weeks had done what Knox said they might. Confirmed that what was between us held up under distance and time and the ordinary pressure of real life. It had not evaporated. If anything, it had settled into something steadier. We sat at the kitchen table and he poured water and we talked, and it was easy in the way that only things that have been tested can be easy. True ease, the kind that isn't performing casualness but genuinely feels it. At some point, after a long and comfortable silence that neither of us felt any need to fill, he looked at me across the table and said, "I'm glad you came back." "I live 20 feet away," I said. "You know what I mean," he said. I did know what he meant, and he knew it. And we sat with that understanding between us, honest and unrushed, the way we'd learned to do things. There are moments in a person's life that feel like they arrived from somewhere unexpected but look, in retrospect, like they were always pointed this way. I don't think the universe orchestrated a shipping algorithm error to bring two people on the same floor of an exposition park apartment building together. I don't think fate sits around managing delivery logistics. But I do think that ordinary things can become extraordinary depending on whether you're paying attention when they happen. Whether you're willing to knock on a door. Whether you're willing to tell the truth. Whether you're willing to wait for things to be clean before you let them grow. Knox and I have been together for 2 years now. We still live on the 4th floor, though in one apartment instead of 2. His bookshelves remain in no identifiable organizational system, and I have given up trying to understand them. His photograph of the Colorado mountains is still on the wall, and I understand it now the way he explained it. A beautiful trip, a chapter that was real and is finished, part of the full story of who he is. The prosthetic design clinic promoted him to lead the team he'd been part of, and Amara, now 9 years old, came back for an adjustment last spring and apparently told Knox, with the complete confidence of a 9-year-old, that his work was very professional. He texted me that quote immediately, and I saved it. My field work continues to take me into difficult terrain and strange, quiet places at the edges of the urban world. Knox has come with me twice, out into the field on weekends where I could show him the work instead of just describing it. He is good in the outdoors, attentive and unhurried, the way he is everywhere. We went back to the San Gabriel Mountains on the anniversary of our first real hike together. Different trail, same range. We ate sandwiches at the top of a ridge with the whole basin laid out below us, the city small and glittering in the distance, and the sky bigger than it ever looks from down there. He said, "Do you think we would have actually met if not for the package?" I thought about it honestly. Probably not like this. Maybe a nod in the elevator eventually. The algorithm did us a favor, he said. 3 times, he agreed. We sat on that ridge for a long time after that, not talking much, which is one of my favorite things about being with him. The quiet between us has always been good. Right from the beginning, on the first evening in his kitchen, that quiet had a quality to it that felt like something built rather than something empty. I used to think love was something that arrived fully formed if the conditions were right. A feeling that appeared and announced itself, and you either had it or you didn't. I've learned through the specific education of my own choices, good and imperfect and honest, that it's more like the wetland near the San Gabriel foothills. Small, quiet, situated in the middle of everything that should prevent it from existing. But there because the conditions, when you look closely, were actually right all along. And once you find it, you do your best not to develop over it. Knox and I do our best, and so far I think we're doing all right.